I was showing up just kind of default in autopilot, and made an intentional decision of, okay, something needs to shift both the work and family dynamic for us.
A switch point moment is a moment in time that fundamentally changes your life because of a connection you made with another human being. My name is Shawn P Neal, and this is the Switch Point Project. And hey, Switch Pointers, thanks for joining me this week. I am super excited to bring a guest this week who I have, I've got a high school history with. It's been many, many years since we met each other, but Janelle DeWolf is going to be joining me. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She has went from the corporate life into an entrepreneur, being a certified Enneagram coach. She's passionate about helping people live into their gifts and talents with greater self-awareness. Janelle is an insightful, aware, resourceful, passionate encourager, and she's going to share her story today. And it's going to be really exciting. Now, if you're wondering what this whole Enneagram thing is, it's one of the most powerful and insightful tools for understanding ourselves and others. The Enneagram helps us to see ourselves at a deeper and more objective level, and that can be of an invaluable assistance on our path to self-knowledge. So with that being said, stick around, hear a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back with an interview with Janelle DeWolf. See you on the other side. And welcome, Janelle DeWolf. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. We've talked previously about the Enneagram and your work with B23 Strategies, so leadership development. You've got like a whole lot of really cool things going on there. But I kind of want to dive in a little bit about, let's be totally honest about our history here. We went to school together.
Give all our listeners some background.
Yeah, and we're now catching up after X number of years. I'm not putting that out there. I don't. Nobody cares about the math. But it was nice to reconnect with you and to learn that we were kind of sharing some similar space in this world of leadership development and some of the things that we have done. I'd love to just kind of rewind if we can, and let's go back and talk about those early days post high school. Were you a person that kind of knew her path, or where did you find yourself upon graduating, and what direction did you start out in?
Yeah, I think that all comes full circle by the time we get to the end of kind of where we are now. But no, I didn't. And quite honestly, I feel like I was in a space both in high school years and really the direction I went in college, where I had people speak into me of just, you're a female, you're strong in math and science, you should go be an engineer. And it was just more like, okay, that's what I'll do. So I went to Purdue and I pursued environmental engineering, actually changed my major in the midst of those 4 years to focus on environmental science and political science, thinking I was going to pursue law, and ended up getting a job after dropping engineering as an environmental engineer with GM. So ultimately ended up in that world anyway. And, especially I have 3 kids, 2 of them being girls. And it's something that I took consciously into raising them, into how we speak into others, because ultimately that was really not the right world for me. It was a great experience. I loved my corporate time with GM, certainly fed into the experience of leadership development, ultimately where I am. But if I were to look at me on paper and the kind of work we do now with different personality assessments and speaking into people, that world is really not where I ever should have been. So I was definitely not in a post-high school space of knowing exactly what my strengths were, what my sweet spot was. And it's something that I love working even with young people, even though it's not a main part of what we do, and helping them see some of who they are on paper too, to know how to pursue what their future looks like.
Yeah. And, I mean, on the surface, environmental engineering sounds fantastic. I mean, what a cool career it would seem to be, but if it's not the right fit, then it can be very disconcerting. What would you say were some indicators early on that the fulfillment side wasn't there?
Yeah. And it wasn't even necessarily the job itself. Like I said, my experience with General Motors was great. The actual experience I was getting on the job was phenomenal. It was ultimately knowing myself now. I'm extremely relational and very much a people person. And the way the job ultimately worked out, some of which I asked for myself at the end of my career, which was working from home to be able to have some flexibility with my family. I was working from home and supporting international sites. So I was really only on calls with sometimes countries on completely different time zones, on off schedules, and my time of filling up with relational aspects was very minimal. And so I kind of worked myself into a situation where I wasn't using my strengths and I wasn't doing anything to energize or refuel myself, and felt very depleted at the end of days. And as I look back and reflect on that, knowing what I know about myself now, I can see how it all aligned to do so.
Yeah, I think you're also hitting on a really important point, which is, we have a tendency to find a spot that works. And I'm going to say it works. It may not be the most fulfilling. It may not hit on all of those, key areas that we know we have strengths in, but it works.
Yeah.
And so we just coast along.
Right.
Is there a time when that goes into, I need to make a decision, and what that decision, what was that like for you when it came time to move forward and pursue something else?
Yeah, it was, I would say this decision itself was a very intentional decision, but it was happening during a very accidental version of myself, in that I was showing up just kind of default in autopilot, and made an intentional decision of, okay, something needs to shift for both the work and family dynamic for us. And because of that intentional decision, ultimately ended up in a business, working for myself, growing my own business, and felt myself light on fire of like, oh my gosh, this is my sweet spot. This is where I actually don't know how many hours a day I'm working, because I'm so filled up. And so I can reflect back on the time and see where ultimately parts of the job were depleting me, but I was just in a stage of life where I was very accidentally showing up on default, giving a lot to others, giving a lot to the job, and not doing a lot of personal growth work, not a lot of self-reflection, not a lot of intentional time for myself. And, that was pretty much my 20s. So,
well, and, people, I think, tend to hold on to things that maybe it's not their sweet spot because of the comfortability, but the security they feel.
For sure.
And
we don't know
entrepreneurism. Yeah, entrepreneurism is that, we're talking about a completely different approach to work. Can you talk about the difference that you felt when in that security side of, I have a job, I have a paycheck, I have an employer, versus I'm on my own? Right.
That great deal of uncertainty, a whole lot of trust and faith in, being fortunate enough to do it with a partner in life, that we were walking alongside each other, supporting each other through that. But it was most definitely a leap of faith. And I think ultimately a decision about priorities, and really a decision of, okay, what is most important? And right now it's not this corporate job that is sucking the life out of me and allowing me not to give my best ultimately when I'm at home as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, isn't there? When it comes to, and I see a lot of people who, and I know you do in the work you find as well, a lot of people who are existing in that plane. I I really want to look at this idea of understanding ourselves at such a deep level. And you've said a couple of things early on that we'll reflect on here. You know, you were talking about being relational, being a people person. You know, are those discoveries that kind of came out of that time where you felt the emptiness and you started asking what the emptiness was, or how did you come to that discovery of what you really needed?
Yeah, I think a lot of life experience can reveal that in its own time. But I am so grateful for the shortcuts of things like the tools and resources that have been developed that ultimately our company uses to help guide people in that direction. I would say in that season, it was more an understanding and a recognition of, once I started doing a different level of work, it was working with other people and being relational and watching them grow in their own right and in different ways and different levels. That is actually where I get my passion. And two of the primary tools we use at B23 Strategies are Gallup Strengths Finder and the Enneagram. And if you look at my Gallup Strengths Finder, my top 5 strengths, I am relationally strategic, and developer is my number 1 strength. And so it makes a whole lot of sense that I sit in this space and become very passionate and fueled by it, by watching others grow and develop.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? And you saw exactly where I was going with that, because there are now tools out there for us to lean into, to maybe make those discoveries instead of having years of suffering before we come upon them ourselves.
We can let life teach us for sure, but there are some nice shortcuts too.
Exactly. Tell me a little bit about those shortcuts and some of the success that you see, maybe some of the changes that you see in people once they have, had the Enneagram as an experience in their life.
Yeah, I think the 2 words that primarily come to the surface for me are accidental and intentional. And I think when, I can reflect on my own experience that we've talked about, of I can see where I was just really just showing up to life on a daily basis. And as I said, meeting the needs of others, meeting the needs of work, and just operating in more of a default mode. And when we use a lot of these resources, when we are allowed these shortcuts and begin to truly know ourselves with a whole new level of self-awareness, we can begin to recognize some of the ways that we're operating on autopilot. We have a shadow side, have our blind spots that are truly getting in our way and really not allowing us to reach our ultimate potential and really live as the best version of ourselves.
Yeah. There is an amount of, I think, I'm trying to find the right words here. There's an amount of humility that we have to have when we approach this. There is an amount of skepticism that we have to throw to the wayside. Mm-hmm. When it comes to somebody, who, and I want to talk to people here who specifically have felt like they have maybe had a predestined path, or that they followed what they thought they were supposed to do, and now they're coming into a space where maybe they have the opportunity to use one of these tools, but there's hesitation there. There's, I don't really want somebody to tell me who I am.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that person who feels that resistance, who's not really sure about this, and maybe has to face some things about themselves that they didn't really want to deal with?
Yeah, I think what's coming up for me is a quote that he is an Enneagram teacher. His name is Ian Morgan Cron, but he says, the Enneagram doesn't put me in a box. It shows me the box I've been in and how to get out of it. And I think that is one of the things that I have found, is that there are certainly different assessments we can take that can just show us kind of on paper, this is how you show up, and you read the results once and so be it. What I have found personally with especially the Enneagram is it is a life-guiding growth tool, in that it shows us a lot about ourselves, but also leads us on a growth journey that we can continue to recognize how we're showing up, how we can operate within our true self and kind of start to peel off some of these default layers, and that we get to kind of wake up to life and not just live inside this box. So you can view it with a attitude and perspective of I'm being limited and told who I am, or you could view it with the potential of I'm being given the opportunity to truly flourish and come into the fullest version of myself that has been very limited before.
What's the one thing that you would say was the most, whether it's Enneagram or not, you thought was the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself throughout your lifetime of growth?
That not everybody sees the world the way I see it.
Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah. That when we can really begin to appreciate and operate with compassion, that we all kind of wear different lenses of how we filter and view the world. So especially in conflict, we can have a sense of appreciation for how someone's coming at something. For example, myself, I'm an Enneagram 2. 2s very intuitively sense the needs of others. And so therefore, we can walk through life with an assumption that if we very intuitively can sense the needs of others, when others that we're doing life with are not meeting our needs, we're assuming that that's a very personal thing because, well, of course they intuit my needs because I intuit their needs. But when we even can just understand, no, like that is not how they show up in the world. That is something that is more of a superpower of specifically this type, as all 9 types have some amazing superpowers, that we can just operate in so much more grace and compassion in daily life.
Yeah, that I think that's so profound, and especially when you talk about the fact that I believe that you should believe what I believe because that's how I believe.
Right.
And it's difficult to accept, but I think once we get past that, my gosh, the world opens up to us, doesn't it?
Right. And that we can just have a whole new sense of appreciation for people's individuality and perspectives and opinions and responses.
B23 Strategies. You have recently, this has been since COVID, partnered with someone.
Yes.
And you both came together to create B23 Strategies. What is that exactly? Like what scope of work do you do?
Yes.
And where are you focused in?
Yeah. So when we merged our businesses, we were able to, she holds different certifications as well, one primarily being Gallup Strengths Finder. And it was where we naturally were able to layer strengths and Enneagram and see this really cool sweet spot of what happens when we can put those two together. We work with forward-thinking companies that believe that people are their greatest asset and therefore want to invest in them, grow them, develop them, and really give them this same path toward, because a couple of things we say is you have to know yourself to lead yourself, and you have to lead yourself before you can lead others. And we know that leadership is much more than just inside the 4 walls of a business, that when people can really tap into that and operate within that level of themselves, it's a domino effect into their families, into their communities. And that is, as John Maxwell says, where we can truly change our world. We don't have to change the world, but if we can change our world and we can give people the path and the permission to do so, that's what we're passionate about.
That's very cool. So you've been on this journey for how long now with B23?
B23 officially kind of opened its doors in January of 21. So we began starting the businesses in 2020, and then so just fresh over a year.
I love it. And I one thing that I really like about that is that, when you look at what COVID and 2020 did to a lot of businesses, on the other side of it, we saw a lot of things born, a lot of businesses born, and a lot of opportunities that came out of it. And this obviously was one that is a great thing to share. What do the next 5 years look like for you and for the business? Where are you headed?
Yeah. A really cool season of life for us personally, as our youngest just graduated high school. And so we're shifting into a whole new season that I'm looking forward to. I've loved having adult children and watching them, even when we talk about personality, like truly just come into their own and discover themselves, watch them flourish in their own personal gifts and talents. So the next 5 years for me is a really cool stage of life. Getting to do life alongside my husband and 3 adult kids. And then for the business, we really, since we are newer, we have a lot of vision and hope for significant growth and the kind of impact that we're going to be able to make by partnering with some of these forward-thinking companies, as I said, that really are investing in their people and know that that is what will make their businesses flourish as well.
Yeah, it's one thing to catch somebody or a business in crisis. It's another thing to find someone who is proactive and understands the value of what you bring to the table before it becomes crisis.
Right.
I want to ask you, there's a sign, because everybody is listening, they can't see it. There's a sign behind you.
Yeah.
And one of the lines on that really stands out to me is, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about that for a minute? Because I think that's so true.
This has hung in my office for probably the last 5 to 7 years. It's a quote that very personally impacted me. It's from Marianne Williamson. And it is just tapping into that constant daily reminder and belief that we are each individually created to be amazing. And it's, I can physically feel it in my body when I say that, but it's one of my greatest life's works of when I get to walk alongside someone personally coaching them, or when we're with teams, for them to really, whether it be from just seeing themselves on paper or walking through this own growth work of recognizing, man, like, I was created very intentionally and I don't need to hide this part of myself. And that sometimes the most courageous thing to do is for us to step in to who we were created to be and what lights us up. And that is where we get to shine our greatest light in the world. And that Marianne Williamson quote very much emphasizes all of that.
Yeah. And, we talk about that fear of success, and it's a real conundrum for people who are experiencing it. It's that on one side, I want success so bad. On the other side, I don't feel either that I deserve it or that I can handle it when I get it.
Right. And I think deserving it is a big part of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I know as a fact is that our listeners are going to want to know more about you. They're going to want to know more about B23. I would love if you would share a little bit about how they can get in touch with you, how they can find you on the internet.
Yeah.
How can we find you?
Yeah, find us probably most easily at www.b23strategies.com. We're on Instagram at B23_strategies. LinkedIn. Personally, I'm Janelle DeWolf, or on Instagram, Janelle.DeWolf. And I love to connect with people as well. As I said, I'm very relational, and it's one of my life's greatest joys of just hearing people's stories and helping them live out their story. Part of my previous life was also being a photographer, and that's what I fell in love with photography about as well, was getting the opportunity to showcase people's stories. So connect with me, and I'd love to hear your story.
That's good stuff. I really appreciate you. And by the way, in all fairness, you gave me an opportunity. I did not have time yet to do the Enneagram. So
I can't wait till you do.
I want to commit to doing that. And then I would love if you would come back for a very short, but in just very informative follow through interview to talk to me about what those results mean, and then how someone could apply that into their personal search, into their business, or whatever facet of life that they can improve with it. Would you?
Yeah, I would be honored to do that. For sure.
Let's do that. We'll commit to that.
Okay. We'll commit to it.
All right.
Part 2, coming soon.
The Switchpoint Project is part of the Switchpoint Media Network. Switchpoint Media creates raw and revealing conversations that explore the intersection of self and social awareness, growth, and authentic human connection. For more great podcast and videocast, be sure to join us at switchpoint.media.